have a very special guest, Matt Christman, co-host of the only socialist podcast currently available, Chapo Trap House. Matt, we love your work. Welcome to QAnon Anonymous.
Thank you guys for having me.
So, as threatened, we're having you on to clear up a few things regarding JFK, his son, the death of George H.W. Bush, and the deep state. I know just from listening to some of your other stuff that you're a fan of all of those things.
Yes, they all rule.
In the flat information world, they're also all equivalent. You were brought up by 2 history books and raised on a diet of Civil War gruel in a red state. How does it feel now? Are you comfortable as a coastal elite living in a derelict IPA factory in Bushwick?
That was always the dream, and it's finally here, so couldn't be happier about it.
And now it sounds like you've also somewhat fixed the tin can problem. That I guess that was your voice, right? Like you just had some surgery?
Yes, took care of it.
Amazing. But what is your background like, jokes aside? Like, where did you grow up, and how have your origins informed your politics?
I'm from Wisconsin, the town for making a murderer specifically.
Wow.
Right.
Not a lot of politics in my background, really. It just sort of, over the years, found it to be the most interesting thing, I guess. I don't know. There's really no supervillain origin story that I can really pinpoint.
But you do have a specific interest in the Civil War, right? Was that your first rabbit hole?
Oh yeah, I was a Civil War nerd in junior high school, and it powered me kind of through my school years, and it did by kind of obsessing about it. It gave me a framework for politics where slavery I figured was pretty bad.
Uh-huh.
And so
Good.
the people, it gave me a shorthand for when I was trying to evaluate current politics. And it seemed like anybody who had a lot of good things to say about the country and the insurgency that was initiated to defend slavery was probably pretty bad too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, let's talk a bit about the older conspiracy surrounding the assassination of JFK. What do you think happened there? Obviously, every time I look into it, I just get more confused. But do you think it's credible to connect the handsomest president's death to George H.W. Bush and the CIA?
Well, it's been said a number of times, but it's true that the one man in America who was of conscious age on the day of the Kennedy assassination who doesn't know where he was that day is George H.W. Bush. He famously was unable to recall what he did that day when asked later, but records indicate that he was, in fact, in Dallas.
Which is absolutely nuts because, like, we all, like, I remember where I was during 9/11. I'm sure Julian does, Matt. I'm sure you do as well. Like, during big major events like that, I mean, it's pretty frozen in time. So maybe his brain had already just started, like, turning into a crustacean at that point, and
I think he was. I think he remembers very well. It's just embarrassing to say that you were basically the footstool that the killer was standing on in the repository to make sure he could reach the window. So at the time, I mean, he was the head of the CIA, right?
No, not at that point. There is a theory that because he was still an oil man at that, he was a sort of a wildcatter. It was basically a hobby because he came from incredible patrician wealth, obviously.
Right.
But he wanted to strike out on his own, and he did that by going to the oil fields of Texas. So he was, publicly anyway, a private oil man. But there are people who claim that his company had connections to the CIA and was involved in things like logistics for the Bay of Pigs and whatnot. But I haven't looked into it closely enough to confirm or deny any of that.
Right. There's you'll see in the other part of the episode we did some digging and found that there's a Russian oil man of all nationalities that he and his family were connected to, who was a close associate of Oswald.
But George de Mohrenschildt?
Yes, my friend.
Of course you know him.
Of course. Well, because when I Google like H.W. Bush, like JFK assassination, like conspiracy, like the first thing that came up was the letter that he wrote Bush.
You can only reach Jake's level of knowledge by Googling and reading the first 5 results.
Yeah, I'm like 3. I'm like basically all the people that we make fun of. Like I'm like a 3 to 4 link in like type of guy. Like if I have to go to the second page, like forget about it.
You're also just a 3 to 4, just like on a snack scale.
Yeah, 3 to 4, just on a life scale. I have to go to my shitty day job.
So wait,
after this.
what do you know about de Mohrenschildt?
I know that he kind of took Oswald under his wing when he lived in Dallas, and he was in that white Russian emigre circle, and he was an oil speculator, and that he has connections to intelligence circles, and that he blew his brains out in his garage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Bill O'Reilly was outside his door.
Oh,
Wait,
no shit.
Excuse me? Really?
Well, that's how O'Reilly puts it. I believe he was lying about that. He was on the phone with somebody else when they were trying to contact him for an investigation. But there was a reporter at his door when he blew his brains out.
Yeah, O'Reilly's like, listen, I've showed up to a lot of Jewish people's homes. Every time I walk in, their heads are blown off. I think I did it. But yeah, Mohrenschildt, it's very confusing to me because looking over the stuff that Jake dug up, like, the guy is being accused by the American government of being a Nazi sympathizer, but then he's also clearly some sort of Marxist, and then Oswald was into Marxism, and then there's a joke photo that he took of Oswald where Oswald wrote on the back, "Hunter of Fascists." So it's very confusing to me, like what the political spectrum looked like among that group of weird people talking to each other.
Yeah, I think the most benign explanation for Mohrenschildt is that he was basically a cad. That he was a kind of a quasi con artist. He was a guy who he tried marry. He was a big fan of marrying up, and wasting his in-laws' money and things like that. And he was much more bullshit than actual results when it came to his oil speculations. And the theory, and Stephen King talks about this in his novel about the Kennedy assassination, is that he was basically just fucking with Oswald because he was this dorky, earnest ideologue nerd, and Mohrenschildt basically thought it was funny to wind him up.
So basically, you have like a Rick Wilson kind of guy who really doesn't have the upper hand, but is constantly owning somebody for fun.
Yeah, I mean, because I can imagine if I met Oswald that he would be the kind of person that if you were of a certain aristocratic, cruel sensibility, might be fun to mess with.
Yeah.
Because he was sort of the opposite of the Mohrenschildt. The Mohrenschildt doesn't seem to have any real ideology. He was a classic mid-century, like a George Sanders character or something. Just this guy flying about, smoking the cigarette the Nazi way, or with a cigarette holder, and just being very fey and very ironic and having a bemused smirk at all of the ideologies and passions of the age. That kind of thing. A guy like Oswald would be the opposite of him, and someone he would have every desire to fuck with. Or he was his CIA handler. Who knows?
So you're telling us that Mohrenschildt triggered Oswald so bad that he killed JFK?
I mean, honestly, if they were having these conversations and Mohrenschildt is messing with him and saying, so if you're really serious about this stuff, what are you going to do about it? Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, that's not impossible. And it's funny, too, because in his CIA file, it mentions 2 times that, like, what a ladies man and, like, schmoozer he is. Like,
fucked a lot.
It's almost as if the CIA agent writing up his thing is, like, kind of jealous of him. He's like, oh, he's very good with the ladies, and, like, it was not unreciprocated.
A virgin Lee Harvey Oswald and Chad George the Mohrenschildt situation.
Oh, beautiful.
Wow, that sheds like a whole new light on this. I think we just blew this shit wide open.
Wide open. Well, so, people on the right love to talk about the deep state. Of course, QAnon is obsessed with it. If you had to define a matte version of the deep state that's believable and has operated at least as long, like it needs to have some kind of control over a period of time, what would it be?
I'm honestly amazed that more lefties of the Oliver Stone generation aren't pissed at getting their shit stolen from QAnon, because all the shit they talk about with deep state, that's just repackaged military industrial complex stuff.
Yeah.
There used to be a time when if somebody started talking to you about Truman and the formation of the National Security Council, they were a left winger, but now it's probably some fucking psycho MAGA person.
Yeah.
Because what they're talking about is a real thing, which is that the bureaucratic institutions of the American state persist beyond the influence of transient political figures who are only in office for relatively short periods of time and don't have the ability to burrow through the layers of self-protecting bureaucracy that maintain the that's why it's called this deeper structures of government.
Yeah.
And that means you're talking about the Pentagon, you're talking about the National Security Council, you're talking about all of the intelligence agencies that it is an umbrella for, and that they have an agenda and they have a geostrategic plan that is independent of the desires or campaign promises of any political figure, and that when those two things come into conflict, the resources and permanent bureaucratic fixtures of the deep state overcome the objections of the political class.
Yeah.
Like, you could argue that's been a part of government since the creation of modern states, but it's in the United States asserted itself most strongly post World War II with the creation of that national security state.
Yeah, and if I had to put a face to any of this, it would be Hoover, who, I think it was, 4 decades, multiple presidents, and I mean, he certainly had an agenda of his own.
Yeah, and
yes, absolutely.
Speaking of the National Securities Act, when I was doing my research, I was following a Q link that takes you to like a coding for kids. It's like a coding for kids website that's like hosted on like the .gov or whatever. What? And it was like, can you believe that like these people use this as comms? And so I was like, all right, fuck it, I'm high. Like, I've got a couple minutes to fuck around, and I decoded this whole thing. It said. Harry Truman started the National Securities Act in 1970, whenever it was. It was just a fucking like fact. Yeah, it was just like a dumb fact.
To drink your Ovaltine?
Yes.
Yeah, you've put it all together. It's like epic bacon.
Yeah. I felt like such a rube.
So okay, like, what do you make of the QAnon phenomenon? We've seen you kind of make gentle fun of it online. Why has it gained traction, in your opinion, at this particular juncture of history?
Well, there are the broader cultural reasons, and then there's the narrower specific need that QAnon satisfies amongst the more conspiratorial Trump supporters. So in a broad sense, the hyper speed of information and the fracture of the media landscape has created a situation where everyone is piecing together their own versions of reality out of just a bunch of shattered pieces of porcelain. And that is going to lend itself towards conspiratorial thinking, just because there is no objective agreed upon reality that we can all work off of. And so that means we're going to just start improving, basically. And because we're in a time where the actions of the state seem so remarkably alienated from the input of either voters or their representatives, that the idea that there is some unseen hand maneuvering things is very persuasive. And because we don't have a language of class, we don't have a language of capital, it's and we do instead have a collection of film and televised narratives that have comprised the majority of our media diet, that disquiet and alienation and suspicion gets funneled into these stories, because they give us the same sensations that we get from the films and television we watch, and because we don't know how to talk about things like concentrated capital and its deforming effect on the systems of government that we produce that we claim to be democratic. And specifically QAnon. So before QAnon was Pizzagate, which took over the fringier parts of the Trump base even before the election. But then Trump won, and that created a crisis, because Trump had been, in these people's minds, the antithesis of Pizzagate, the avenger, the guy who was going to clean the Augean stables of pedophiles and psychopaths and globalists. But then he won, and none of them went to jail. None of the pedophile rings were broken open. No children were led out of dank cages in pizza restaurant.
They just let into jank cages.
And that creates a crisis, if you really believe this. Because how can Trump be the savior of America if he cannot also banish the deep state perverts who have done all these awful crimes? And so Q came into that resolve that contradiction by saying, oh no, this is all happening just secretly.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can show you the codes that are Trump's winking to you, the elect, because of course that's always a big part of conspiracy thinking, is that it makes you get to flatter yourself that you see things other people don't.
Right.
I mean, it really is like, it's a Gnostic view of the world. And you've got this fake news media and then the globalists who are sort of the demiurge, preventing you from piercing the veil and seeing the real reality that Trump is trying to reveal to everyone. And that allows you to think, oh yes, Trump is still the savior. He is daddy, because this has all happened. All of these forces are marshaling behind closed doors. Either they've secretly already arrested people and given them trackers and stuff, which they seem to have gotten away from, to the new idea that, well, this is all going to culminate in one just day of reckoning when tanks roll down the street and the entire opposition is rolled up in one massive sweep. Either way, it allows you to think that Trump is the savior and the power, and also that there is a deep state of reptiles, pedophiles, and have those things both be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. And like if it doesn't happen, it's only because like they got to him. Like it's there's a built-in fail-safe for like when every time nothing happens.
Yeah. The crafty deep state, they were able to kill George H.W. Bush and then have his funeral to postpone D5, because as we all know, you can't arrest anyone on the day the funeral is happening. That's against the law.
I think they made him take a suicide. They were like, George, you've got to sacrifice yourself for the greater good.
We traded that you would kill yourself anytime we asked you to for being able to pinch any butt that comes near your wheelchair. And he was like, I will take that.
He's like, I'll take it.
I'll take it as long as I get to keep pinching keister. So the other thing that strikes me is like Q, if you're thinking that there's all these invisible shadow hands controlling reality, which, let's be honest, for the average human being caught in this system, that is actually what's happening. There's a bunch of people, you can't really reach them. But what you want, like, it's okay to live in a scary world, but you just need a hero. And Q is like, he is the deep state to the deep state, like he is the guy on their side. And I think that really also satisfies people a lot, because otherwise they just have to deal with like the big faceless monolith that really doesn't care about them.
Yeah. It's like living in a Mission Impossible movie every fucking day of your life.
Yeah. Jacob Baccarat, I mean, what we're finding that, and this is what's so frustrating to me about Pizzagate specifically, the component of that is that the basic instinct, the idea behind Pizzagate, that elite, wealthy people ritually abuse children as a bonding mechanism and as a way to get blackmail and a way to initiate people into what it means to be a ruler. I think that's true. I think that's largely true.
Yeah, me too.
Jeffrey Epstein obviously is a hugely valuable lesson in the truth of that.
Yeah,
right.
And we know that they're doing that. And I think Jacob Baccarat, my friend who's on Twitter, after the Miami Herald article came out revealing how the current Secretary of Labor was the one who helped give Epstein his incredible sweetheart deal where he didn't even have to stay the whole day in jail, and it was a year in a county lockup, and gave preemptive immunity to all of his unnamed co-conspirators. And then the guy was rewarded with a Secretary of Labor job. Jacob Baccarat, he said that the real fantasy of Pizzagate isn't even really the basement layers or any of that. It's that any of these people will ever face justice.
Yeah, no,
which
that's
is the fantasy of Q.
Spot on.
That there's ever going to be a reckoning instead of one unified ruling class.
Yeah.
That is never going to really reveal the truth about what they do or call anyone accountable to anything that they're all mutually implicated in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, okay, so, earlier in the episode, we do examine that Jake believes fully that Vincent Fusca is JFK Jr. and is still alive.
That's not true.
And is cute. He believes it fully. He'll put it on his grave, as we've always said. But who do you think, Matt, is behind the Q drops? I mean, someone someone is writing these, because if it was an automatically generated bot thing, it wouldn't have like 2 weeks of silence at crucial times. It would just kind of keep rolling.
I could be persuaded otherwise, but I thought that I think it was an NBC News article.
Yeah.
About Q that posited that it's those South African YouTube guys.
Yeah, Baruch the Scribe, Pamphlet and on. We do explore that in another episode. Yeah, that doesn't seem too unlikely to me. I've heard also Michael Flynn Jr., which I could 100% believe, at least was one of the Qs at some point, but who knows? I don't know if he knows how to use the chance.
Yeah.
He's stupid.
Yeah.
If he was Q, he would have accidentally posted a Q drop under his own name because he forgot. I mean, he is a dummy.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, we'll go with the weird nerds.
His Twitter bio is rife with emojis and stars and flags. That's usually a good indicator. That's
So, Matt, we recently saw D5 come and go. The supposed day where mass arrests, or at the very least indictments, would befall the deep state, specifically the Clintons, but also Obama, the Bushes, George Soros, and Robert Mueller, among others. This would supposedly kick off what QAnon believers call the storm. Obviously, nothing happened, and they got dunked on relentlessly on Twitter. And actually, this has happened for the last, I don't know how long, basically periodically.
Year and some change.
They just do this once in a while. So now that they're saying, Bush Sr.'s funeral was used to delay the whole thing, like you mentioned, and that D13 might be the real D, which is my birthday, so I'm kind of excited about that. But I also am wondering what D is going to be the right D, in your opinion.
Deez Nuts.
Wow. Okay.
I have to say that I got so fucking frustrated with D5 because in the lead up to it, I went on Twitter and I said, and I used all the hashtags, and I know that these people obsessively click on the hashtag, so I knew they would see it.
Of course.
I said, anybody who really believes this, bet me money. Put money on the table that something will happen on D5, because I would bet any amount of money you want to put on. I would do it any way you want to do it to assure that I wouldn't welsh, because that's free money. That's free money from the government, because there's zero way anything was going to happen, and I knew that 100%. And of course, none of these idiots wanted to bet, because they really are full of shit. At the end of the day, they're just having fun. I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about it when they get pressed during those interviews, when they're all waving their cutout Q signs in front of a Trump rally. They end up sort of falling back on it's fun. It's an enjoyable treasure hunt.
Yeah, it's like
And they don't really think that anything is going to happen.
Yeah,
because they couldn't get any of these motherfuckers to actually commit to any money thing. And then a number of them were insisting that after D5 came and went, no, it was never about mass arrests. Q never said that. Actually, it was about a congressional committee hearing on the Clinton Foundation.
Yes.
Got postponed because of the funeral, and that was the original D5. Or also, someone pointed out to me that that somebody involved in one of the Panama Papers money laundering banks was arrested or indicted or something. And that bank, of course, is connected to the Clinton Foundation, which, yeah, I'm sure it was. Fucking gigantic nonprofit. I'm sure it's connected to a shit ton of banks. Yeah. And for them, that was all it took. But I got one guy finally, and I got this one guy who was hammering and bet me, and he wouldn't do it. He would not. He wouldn't even. He was just. And these guys are. It's so frustrating because they're just so. They can't even parse English language half the time. It's amazing that they think that they've broken the code of the universe when a simple English sentence will just go over their heads and they won't understand it. Finally got a guy. He wouldn't bet money because he's a coward. I finally got a guy to say, if at the end of 2019 there haven't been significant arrests, he would delete his Twitter account, and I would have to delete mine if there are. It wasn't really an equal bet because he has like 3,000 followers and a fucking ratio of followers to followed. But I still took it because I just wanted something on the thing. But he also insisted to me he wouldn't bet on it, of course, but he made a hunch that by the end of February I would have to delete my account. So I guess they're all committing now, the ones I've seen, saying, well, it's got to be 2019 because some statute goes into effect that is part of the buildup to the arrests, and they can't do anything until this is in force. So they can't strike until the new year. So
that's a really broad. You've accepted a bet based on an entire year. You're gonna have
that's all I do. I want one of these motherfuckers to just put something down. I have to give them anything they want in terms of the parameters of the bet, because otherwise they won't do it.
They won't do it.
By February, I'm going to start shitting in his mouth every day on March 1st. So I don't have to wait till the end of 2019.
So how are you going to protect Hillary for an entire year from the truth, Matt? Don't you think that's going to be exhausting?
Ooh, I am worried. It's going to be tough.
But dude, like you nailed it. I mean, that's all these guys are willing to bet, and you deleting your account in shame is the most that they could hope for. I mean, that's all they care about. They don't care about money or any of this. They want like people to be owned and like to like feel shame and like, you know, like skulk away from their social media presence. Like that you did get the best thing that you could get.
He actually did say at one point, my Twitter account's more valuable than any money. So, it really matters.
Oh my God!
I'm betting. I'm not a coward. I'm betting what really counts.
Yeah, and my 3,000 followers.
100% positive that even if he's still online by the end of 2019, he will not delete.
Well, he won't even be called QAnon by that point. He'll have switched his name to some new fucking insane thing, and he'll pretend you don't exist.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna make fucking alts though. I'm gonna harass that person into oblivion until they were wrong and delete their account.
Now you're confirming what the brochurelists do, which is the praxis of pain and just inflicting it.
On this guy, absolutely. I will do all the pain I can get my hands on.
So what do you think the outcome of the broader QAnon conspiracy and social movement is going to be? Are we looking at a bang? And I don't mean that in terms of Hillary Clinton getting arrested. I mean that in terms of like some dude walking into a pizza place with a gun, or, you know, what do you think? What do you think this is all kind of spiraling around the drain towards?
See, that's the interesting question, because we know that some of these guys get activated. Obviously, first you had the Pizzagate gun guy.
Yep.
Then, by the way, that's the only honorable believer in Pizzagate was that guy.
Hell yeah.
These guys honestly thought that there's a basement full of children being abused in a building that they knew the address of.
Yep.
And they just posted about it. That's cowardice. That is absolute cowardice. That was the only guy who took it seriously. So props to him. And then there was a dude who jackknifed his car in front of the Hoover Dam.
Oh yeah, I remember that guy.
Released the report.
Yeah.
So we know that they could be activated.
Yeah.
But most of them are just posting boomers. So I think that they're probably just going to get into something else. XFL will debut, and they'll do that deal where nobody's allowed to kneel, and they'll just get really into that.
Yeah, I was telling Jake, you know, because sometimes people tend to take this thing seriously, but I really think 90 to 95% of these people, for them, Q is just a thing they do between church and bridge. You know,
absolutely.
That's it. And then the rest of the 10 are a mix of, you know, these kind of like hyper poisoned nerds and legitimately mentally ill people.
Yeah, it's almost
people
like
who are trying to figure out their own way to make money off of it, of course.
Oh, of course. Yes,
oh, yeah, the grifters.
Sorry, forgot them.
Yeah, we do. We talk about that in the
which we are not part of. We're not
obviously.
We're not living. We don't have a Patreon, for example, that you should go to and pay us some money. We're not making any money off the QAnon world in any way, direct or indirect. So we're fans of Chapo, obviously, over here at QAnon Anonymous. What's cooking in Chapo land? Anything special happening in the near future, Matt?
We're gonna do more Twitch content, more not gaming, but events. Basically, we're gonna be doing maybe tabletop gaming or the Pickle Rick card game. I want to play that.
Beautiful.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
I want to be Pickle Rick.
Will you be allowed to consume beer?
Well, just beer.
Nice.
Hard liquor is off the table, literally.
You heard it here. Nobody's going to be feeding Ambien to Matt next time.
No.
So, and what about like you personally? I know Felix just released his 800-hour MMA documentary.
Yeah, that was impressive.
He is amazing. He got to work with Jordan Peterson on that. And you, what personal projects are you up to?
I don't have anything right now. I mean, the thing he was doing looked like a lot of work. No, thank you. I actually do have a few projects, but they're that thing where it's they're still in the early stages of being proffered and shaped out, so I can't really talk about them.
No problem at all. We'll keep that a mystery then. Matt's Twitter is @Cushbomb. And you can find Chapo Trap House everywhere podcasts are distributed. They also have a Patreon. In fact, at this point, I think you guys have founding shares of Patreon. Is that right, Matt?
We not yet. We'll get them.
Somebody cut him in. Isn't it Jack? Are they all called Jack? I think it's another Jack.
Yeah, anybody who's Jack owns some kind of tech something.
It's actually, there's just one Jack, and they're all broken off of the hive. It's a mind being.
Well, thank you so much for making the time and coming on the podcast. Take care, Matt, and we will speak to you soon.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.